The world has revolved around the US dollar for decades. It's the currency that fuels global trade, holds nations' wealth, and acts as a safety net in times of crisis. It's a symbol of stability and power, a cornerstone of modern finance. But what if, one day, that all changed? What if the US dollar lost its crown as the world's reserve currency? The consequences would ripple through economies, societies, and governments across the globe, creating a world vastly different from the one we know today. Right now, more than 50% of global trade is conducted in dollars. When a company in Germany buys oil from Saudi Arabia, chances are it pays in dollars. Even countries that aren't allies of the US hold their reserves in dollars. This dominance gives the US an unparalleled edge, allowing it to exert influence far beyond its borders. But the dominance of the dollar isn't guaranteed forever. Some cracks have already started to show, and if the dollar were to lose its global status, the ripple effects would be earth-shaking. First, let's talk about why the dollar is king. After World War, i.e., the world was in chaos, and the US emerged as an economic superpower. The Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944 made the dollar the backbone of global finance, pegged to gold. Even after the US abandoned the gold standard in 1971, the dollar's dominance remained thanks to trust in the US economy. The US offered stability in an unstable world, and nations around the globe lined up to store their wealth in dollars. But trust is fragile. And now other countries are questioning whether the dollar should still reign supreme. If the dollar were to lose its status, the first domino to fall would be trust in the US economy. Right now, the US can borrow money easily because the demand for dollars is so high. It's like having an unlimited credit card with a low interest rate. Lose that status, and suddenly the interest rates on US debt would skyrocket. Trillions of dollars in borrowing would become much more expensive, sending shockwaves through the US economy. This would hit American households directly. Higher borrowing costs for the government mean higher interest rates on everything from mortgages to student loans. Picture this: you're paying twice as much on your home loan, your car loan, or your credit card bill, all because the world decided it didn't trust the dollar anymore. Families across the US would feel the squeeze as their purchasing power dwindled. Savings would lose value, and the cost of living would surge. But it's not just Americans who would feel the pain. Countries around the globe would scramble to figure out what's next. Right now, many nations hold their savings in US dollars, of $7 trillion worth. If the dollar crashes, those reserves lose value overnight. It's like saving for years, only to wake up and find your savings cut in half. Panic would spread like wildfire, destabilizing economies in every corner of the world. Global trade would also be thrown into chaos. Imagine a world where there's no clear leader in currency. Countries might start using alternatives like the euro or the Chinese yuan. But those currencies come with their own risks. The Eurozone isn't exactly the picture of stability, with ongoing debt crises and political disagreements. And trust in China's transparency is questionable. Without a clear standard, trade deals would slow down, prices would become unpredictable, and businesses would struggle to plan for the future. Global supply chains, already fragile, could collapse under the weight of uncertainty. The US itself would face a harsh reality. For decades, the dollar's reserve status has allowed America to live beyond its means. The country imports more than it exports, racking up a massive trade deficit. Why does this work? Because countries are willing to accept dollars. If that changes, the US will have to pay for imports in other currencies. That means American companies would need to buy foreign currency, driving up costs. Everyday goods like smartphones, clothes, and even food would become more expensive for average Americans. Inflation would surge, making life harder for families already struggling to make ends meet. And let's not forget the political fallout. The dollar's dominance gives the US enormous leverage on the world stage. Sanctions, for instance, work because the US controls access to the dollar. Lose that control, and America's ability to influence global events diminishes. Other powers, like China or the European Union, might step in to fill the void, reshaping the geopolitical landscape. This shift in power dynamics could lead to new alliances and rivalries, with unpredictable consequences for global peace and stability. So, what could cause the dollar to lose its status? One word: alternatives. Right now, countries like China and Russia are actively working to create systems that bypass the dollar. Digital currencies like China's digital yuan are gaining traction. These currencies offer the promise of fast, efficient transactions without relying on the traditional banking system. Even alliances like BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are discussing creating a new reserve currency. The more options the world has, the less it needs the dollar. Another factor is the US itself. The national debt is over $30 trillion and growing. At some point, countries might question whether the US can pay its bills. Combine that with political instability, and trust in the dollar could erode quickly. All it takes is one major event: a war, a financial crisis, or a shift in global alliances, and the house of cards could come tumbling down. And when trust is lost, it's nearly impossible to regain. But let's not forget the human side of this story. In developing countries where inflation is already a daily struggle, losing the stability of the dollar would be devastating. Millions could be pushed into poverty as prices soar and economies crumble. Even in wealthier nations, retirement funds and investments tied to the dollar would shrink. The ripple effects would touch every corner of the globe, from bustling cities to remote villages. Yet, not all outcomes are negative. For the US, losing the dollar's dominance might force the country to confront its economic challenges. Without the cushion of reserve currency status, the US would have to produce more, export more, and balance its books. It's a painful adjustment, but it could lead to a more sustainable economy in the long run. A stronger focus on innovation, manufacturing, and fiscal responsibility might emerge as the silver lining in this otherwise grim scenario. For the rest of the world, a shift away from the dollar might mean less dependence on one country. It could lead to a more balanced global economy where no single nation holds all the cards. Regional currencies might gain prominence, fostering local trade and cooperation. But getting there would be messy. It's like tearing down a skyscraper to build a new one. The destruction is immediate, but the benefits take years to materialize. So, what's next? For now, the dollar remains the king of currencies. But the winds of change are blowing. Countries are preparing for a world where the dollar isn't the default. They're investing in alternatives, building new financial systems, and reducing their reliance on the US. Whether that day comes next year or decades from now, one thing is clear. The end of the dollar's reign would mark the beginning of a new era. And like any era, it would come with winners and losers. The question is, are we ready for what comes next? Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.